This week on the Trailblazers, we feature Chairman and CEO of Croskery Capital Limited, Mark Croskery, who has made a name for himself in the financial sector in securities dealing, investment banking, and more. Stay tuned to hear his story, plus some key investment advice that we can use at this time. Mark Croskery is the chairman and CEO of Croskery Capital Limited, which he founded after spending extensive time in the financial services sector in Jamaica, working in securities dealing and investment banking at SSL Group, Barbados, Stocks and Securities Limited, Jamaica, and NCB Capital Markets Limited, Jamaica. He has over 15 years of experience and has raised public equity funding of over $1 billion Jamaican dollar and debt placements of over US $10 million on behalf of trusted institutional clients and families. Notably, Mr. Croskery led the initial public offering of the Jamaica Stock Exchange JSE on the main market of the exchange and US private placements for Good Hope Adventure Park, Spanish Court Hotel, and Choco Caribbean in Jamaica. As a driven and self-motivated individual, he believes it is important to do what is necessary to make it happen. So of course, I'm delighted to have Chairman and CEO of Croskery Capital Limited, Mark Croskery, this week on the Trailblazers. Mark, it's a pleasure.
I know, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. All right, so jumping right into the conversation, we know of Mark for his business acumen and his work in the financial sector, but before we touch on that, tell me about your story, how you grew up, your early beginnings, because I don't think a lot of people know that. Well, at least I don't.
It's true. I went to prep school in Jamaica, high school, the whole works. I did a lot of internships, that was a part of the things that I love doing, or summer jobs, and I think that's what really resonated with me, and I always encouraged everybody to jump into summer jobs. I did a lot of summer jobs actually with my dad, my mom. My mom at the time had Total Travel Agency. So,
nice.
I was really privileged and lucky to kind of jump into the travel agency at the time, stamp envelopes, kind of really got my work ethic, from these summer jobs. And, as life kind of moved on, parents would always kind of gravitate to me or come to me and say, hey, what should I do with my kids and everything? And, you'd always have these internship, summer programs and tell them to, jump into that and figure out what you want to do in life.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you kind of had a free reign, so to speak?
Somewhat. I did a travel agency. I did the brokerage company. At that time, my dad's brokerage company was called PCY & Co. It was later renamed. I was lucky to, my mom really pushed me into, meeting a, well-known gentleman at the time, Billy McConnell, who was actually at LaSalle's de Mercado. Colin Steele also, very well known on Sagicor boards. And, you got that kind of mentorship when you were really early at kind of 16 years old.
Wow.
And so I was, you kind of get to jump ahead of the curve, but you have no clue, what you're really doing at 16, no matter probably who you are. But I was, when I was at Campion, I was kind of really, getting to meet some brilliant minds in Jamaica, which I was really lucky to do, when you look back at it, and it really starts to get your mind into loving the financial markets and just loving business overall.
Wow. And I mean, getting that early start, because you mentioned your parents being involved in that sector, you having the privilege of having, been mentored by some of those great persons who you just mentioned. Was it just then like the norm for you, or was it just a natural progression then to just enter into the financial?
It felt like, they were both in business. And so both, seeing both of them every morning get up, get up early, 7 a.m., head out to work. It kind of got into you, that kind of work ethic. You really wanted to make money, you really wanted to grow equity in a business from early, but you really weren't sure what you wanted to do. But I did also, work out at thermoplastics, for a summer, again, through Pricewaterhouse or PwC.
Wow.
And that was really amazing. That's one of the kind of fun stories where you're out there and you're listening to Mutty Perkins, every day on the radio. In those days, Mutty was all the rage. We probably still don't have a program like that, on the airwaves. Nationwide is all the rage now, super popular. But in those days, you'd go to work, you're young. I was out in Twickenham Park, Spanish Town, and you're out there, and you're as an intern, you're given always granular work. So
Yes.
you know you get a challenge, reorder the invoices, or you get a challenge, go into the vault, you know, get all these invoices in alphabetical order or get them in numerical order.
Wow.
But it was great to see how to work with people, and it was great to see kind of, you know, what the issues were. It was a very challenging environment because the company was in receivership, but you know, there was a lunchroom, there was a cafeteria, and just to see kind of how, you know, everything evolved. So you know, again, being very young, I was able to kind of, you know, have those internships, those summer jobs, and build relationships in Jamaica.
Indeed, and a lot of persons know you from being at SSL Stocks and Securities Limited, because you've been there, well, you were there
Yes.
quite a bit. What was your experience there? How did you solidify yourself as Mark Croskery?
Well, you know, when you spend, you know, you realize when you spend, you know, 12, 13 years of your life with a company, you realize, and I'm 38 now, so you realize you actually spend almost 33% of your life with a business.
Wow.
You know, I started off at NCB, and it was NCB Capital Markets.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And you know, I had a fantastic time there. You know, was like the Superman of sales, and you work through that, and it's great. And I joined the family business, which was actually my dad's business, which is SSL. And you know, but at the end of the day, we did great. You know, fantastic brand. Learned so much from him and from them, but we had a kind of different vision at the end of the day. And so I really wanted to branch out and create my own thing, which is Croskery Capital now. But you realize you spent a third of your life there. But you know, when visions are different, at the end of the day, which there's nothing wrong with that. I'm very grateful. I learned so much, you know, from the family and from the business, and it's a terrific brand. You know, at the end of the day, I invented the brand. You know, it's been passed on, and SSL is a great brand in Jamaica.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
And so now you, as you mentioned, you're in charge, big man in charge, chairman and CEO of Croskery Capital Limited. Tell us about, you know, that business. Was it difficult for you to transition? And, you know, what are the offerings of the business?
Yeah, it was very tough. I mean, it was almost, you know, being in a business, and when you're in a family business, everybody thinks that you're, you know, you're going around Jamaica, you're doing deals, you're going around the island, everybody says, Mark, good to see you, you know, you're just rich, and boy, you own 51% or you own 100%. But the reality is I was a, you know, 12% shareholder. I was a minority shareholder, so I couldn't call all the shots. But somebody just sees you and says, you know, they see you at the bar, they see you at the supermarket, they see you at the pharmacy, and they just say, you're the big man. And you know, you're growing tons of talent, you're making people wealthy. And at the end of the day, you know, they're saying to you, they want 20%, they want 30% in those smaller companies. And it hits you one day and you say, you have your Jerry Maguire moment. and you say to yourself, I really want more out of life. And so with Croskery Capital now, you know, I have 100% today. You know, maybe I'll have to bring on partners, maybe I'll sell down that stake, you know, to capitalize it more. But at some point, you just have that Jerry Maguire moment where you say you've made a lot of people rich. You've built a lot of persons from, whether it's rural Jamaica, from Kingston, a lot of businesses, subsidiaries. You've made persons rich, you've made them credible, but you actually say to yourself, you have to think about yourself too.
Yes.
You know, you have to start being a little bit more selfish. And you know, at 38 or so, I had it a little bit late in life, because when you're in family business, you think about family first. But actually, you have that Jerry Maguire moment and you say, you just boom, and then you just kind of go and do it. And actually, you know, that's what happened to me last year.
Wow. And I mean, at 38, you've accomplished quite a lot, you know, still relatively young. I mean, so then in terms of, because I was looking at your bio and I was impressed by the part where it mentioned in terms of you being instrumental with the Jamaica Stock Exchange, you know, being listed.
Yes.
Tell us about that experience.
It was, you know, it was one of the high points of my career. But I realized, and you know, speaking to some of my mentors and even persons who I worked with, you know, and looking at my career kind of really plateaued a couple of years ago, you know, and you don't realize it. You know, you're kind of muddling through it and trying to get it better, and you're kind of saying, how are you going to get, you know, how are you going to be optimally happy? But I really realized that, you know, you do all these deals, whether it's 2011, 2012, 2013, and then you really say to yourself, what's the next level? And so really, you know, you have your highs, you have your lows, you make your mistakes, you know, you have your wins. But the stock exchange was one of the biggest wins. You know, great team.
Wow.
Nobody in the brokerage sector actually, you know, wanted that deal.
Really?
It was an RFP at the time. And
Wow.
you know, in my previous capacity, we actually won that transaction, and we thought it was a phenomenal deal. You know, the book value was way higher. You know, the true book value, even the intrinsic value, everything was way higher than what we thought it could come to market. And actually, it took a couple of years to get going. But as you know now, Tamara, the JSE, you're just investing in Jamaica, is all the rage now, especially the last couple of years, to the point where, you know, when you have the Prime Minister, the Minister of Finance, coming on and saying, you know, almost vouching for, say, Wigton, Trans Jamaica, which we've never seen this amount of subscribers come on for stock exchange, for Jamaican stocks. And it has just propelled the revenue of the stock exchange and listed, and just listed companies and the cess revenue, they call it.
Wow.
And so it has resulted in that stock price being probably the best performing stock price, and we were instrumental at the time in listing it. You know, the team that was there, you know, you don't get to kind of market it a lot and everything because it is the stock exchange, you know. And there were a few others, but it was one of the definitely the high points of my career.
That's amazing because, as you rightly mentioned, the stock exchange is doing great things.
Yes.
So to know that you are part of
financial
that.
literacy too, because it gets so much people involved now.
Exactly. All right. So you mentioned that being one of the high points of your career. You know, what about the low points? Because every successful person, a lot of times we feature the glitter and the gold, but sometimes they don't feature what's, you know, you know, the bad part. So what was that for you?
So you know, the high points where you're doing deals, you know, you're doing deals and you're growing the brand. I mean, the brand that we created in a few brands, you know, for example, the brand SSL, the brand Dollar, phenomenal brands we created at the end of the day, and many different brands. You know, I love building brands at the end of the day. So, you know, high points, all the deals, you know, that we did in Jamaica. I think we did the second most IPOs. You know, and so high points, you know, growing teams, growing businesses, seeing persons who were not known in the island, but at the end of the day, we built them and they've gone on to do huge success in their individual capacity, their families, create wealth. So you feel really good about that as a Jamaican and as a person. I think low points, it's a part of investing. You know, when you look at, you know, my previous capacity, some of the competitors, you know, you look at Mayberry, you look at Proven, you look at a lot of them, you look at their balance sheets, they're going to have losers.
Yes.
And you really realize that you have to surround yourself with people who understand, you know, if you got 7 winners, you're going to have 3 losers. And I think that's where really, you know, visions will differ. And so I realized, you know, as Mark at 38, you got to surround yourself with people who understand your vision. So I think low points, you know, Tamara, really, you know, you do 1 or 2 or 3 deals that just don't, you know, really hit the sniff test. They don't perform well after, so they're gonna lose. You're gonna have some losses. You know, I think one of my biggest losers, probably in hindsight, was you know, C2W. But at the end of the day, if you look at many other brokerages, you look at many other things, they might lose 2-3 million US in a bond. They might have a real estate deal where they lose 5 million US. But at the end of the day, they stick with it. And and they have stick-to-itiveness.
Yes.
And they like it. And they might have a winner, like the JSE, that actually maybe you make 5, 10, 15. Now, when you net off those things, the reality is, or hypothetically, you're way ahead of the game.
Yes.
So you're gonna have your low points, and you learn from them, and then you kind of keep going.
I like that, and stick a pin, because one of the things you just mentioned in terms of surrounding yourself with the people that understand your vision, how crucial is that? And that is not applicable to only the financial sector, but just for anybody who wants to be like a trailblazer like you, who is a go-getter and wants to achieve their vision.
And that's what I really want to do with Croskery Capital. You know, like for example, it's interesting. I think it was just posted on Yahoo Finance or Bloomberg. You know, you read these things and you read about like someone like Jamie Dimon's story, and he brought his business, but he felt his career plateaued. Wow. And then, you know, you read about it where he actually, in his case, he got actually fired from, let's say, Citigroup. But he is now the CEO, you know, let's say, of the biggest financial company in the world. Wow. And he says, you know, it might have hurt his net worth, but it didn't hurt his self-worth.
Whoa.
And everybody knows who Jamon Diamond is now. And I guess although
Yeah.
it might sound real, it might sound cheesy, I guess what he's trying to say is that you really got to surround yourself with people who buy into your vision. And you might have a hiccup, you're going to have some low points. But at the end of the day, if you really analyze it, you got to get, and that's what we're trying to do with Croskery Capital, is really find people, you know, the right partners. It's financial advisory, it does consulting as phase one to start, and then really get people who buy into helping families and helping businesses. Because there's a sweet spot out there now that doesn't happen yet in Jamaica.
But for the young professional who's just started out or they're mid-level in their career and they may not have the connections or the wherewithal like you, how is it then that they're able to select those people? What are some of the some of the traits that they look for to select the persons that they think will buy into their vision?
So and it's a great question, and everyone who I recall would come into the office would always ask that. You know, I don't have the network, I don't have the connections, but they had the energy. I was always attracted to that kind of, you know, build a brand and the energy, but everybody is different. You might find a chartered accountant is attracted to somebody who's a bit, you know, slower, and not in a negative way, but who's kind of more, you know, going to take their time. You might find someone who's an engineer is attracted to invest in something in a different way. So I think once somebody has the energy and has and is willing to put in the time, they can find an investor. The thing with millennials that I find nowadays is they do want things now. It is instant gratification. You know, you will get a call that says, hey, you know, if I get this done and we get here, and can I get this amount of funds, can I just list in 2 years? And the reality is it doesn't work that way. You know, you look at these companies and they will reference it sometimes and say, you know, look at Blue Power on the market, look at, you know, Access Financial. But you kind of have to kind of take a step back and say, Access listed in 2009, which is 11 years ago. And I can't remember the start date, but maybe it started 10 years before that. So that was a 20-year plan.
Wow.
And you have to remind that person. And I got a call even today from somebody who's 45, who just said, hey, I have this great idea, you know, can I get some funding? And then if I do, can I list in 2 years? So it's not just a millennial to kind of classify. It's not just an age issue. It's just kind of mindset. But the thing is that there might be someone out there, like, you know, maybe the person who's in the kitchen, and then maybe the business partner, somebody who's good at QuickBooks or accounting. So it's just about mixing maybe the personalities sometimes. So if there's somebody young who doesn't have the connections, then at the end of the day, Croskery Capital could have the connections. And you know, when you hit 38, you might not be as energetic as you were at 25. So you might be wanting to find some energetic persons to help execute the business plan, and then basically it's a good synergy. So no one who is kind of young, doesn't have connections, should be discouraged in Jamaica. Because as long as interest rates are really low at 0.5%, you know, funding should eventually come. Funding can be arranged, you know, out there, even from the traditional companies.
Okay, let me zoom in a little more personal. Who or what motivates you or, you know, inspires you?
Like mentorship?
Yeah.
You know, I was, as I said, kind of, is that really, when I was young, or my teenage years almost, you know, I was lucky to have these kind of very mini sessions, you know. So I was very inspired by, you know, Billy McConnell.
Oh yes, you did mention
who was
him.
like in the rum business, and that's how I was attracted to the rum business, you know. You know, even in my previous capacity, you know, looking at deals like that, you know, I really, you know, you want it to be in rum somehow, right? Because it's an inelastic product, and you know, and persons don't always know, you know, why you go into a transaction, but there's history there from me personally. So what happens is, you know, you think about those things. So, you know, he would always say, you know, get a good base in finance accounting. You know, my bachelor's degree is actually in finance accounting. Or, you know, but he would always say, understand marketing, understand the product. And life is you know, business is about 3 pillars, you know, administration, you know, the product, and kind of, you know, marketing
the product.
And administration is like the accounting, the finance. And that has always stuck with me. You know, Colin Steele, who's legendary stock market investor, you know, very private, very discreet. He's on a few Sagicor boards. You know, I remember him kind of looking at some real estate and, you know, taking me and saying, this is going to be a winner. And, you know, at the time, it was just some flat land. And I look back today and it's all developed. It's a gated community, probably one of the highest price properties in Kingston now. And he
Wow.
was a visionary to be able to see that,
Yes.
you know, roughly 22 years ago. So I was blessed to kind of have, you know, those thoughts, and I've always retained kind of those in my mind. You know, while I was at NCB, you know, there was always, you know, somebody also who was very, you know, very religious, but at the same time also very on the ball, which was Donovan Lewis, you know, and he was always there as an NCB director during his tenure, who would run down to the trading room or call and make sure that we were all at work. So I mean, you go through life. You
Yes.
know, you still communicate with some persons, you might not with everybody, but you always get some knowledge from someone. So I'd always encourage somebody young to interact, you know, ask the question, don't be afraid. And you might not realize it today, but you'll save it in the back of your mind.
Don't be afraid. Mark, you cannot
Yes.
come to the Trailblazers and I not ask you about, especially in light of COVID-19,
Yeah.
the pandemic and the impact it has globally. You know, what are some key investment tips or advice for, especially, you know, anybody as a matter of fact that's just wants to invest, but maybe they don't even really know much about the market.
Yeah. You know, I won't particularly give investment advice, but I always, you know, like to say, I mean, you know, I guess I'd love to start a podcast one day. I'd love to do all these things. I mean, I always like to say I invented, you know, research. You know, people out there might disagree with me, but you know,
invented it.
You know, from a Jamaica perspective. You
Okay.
know, in 2006, 2007, we really started blasting research. I'll never forget those years. You know, just being totally like individually passionate about that, and at the time even bringing U.S. equities to Jamaica. And the thing is that it was revolutionary, and it gave the average Jamaican an opportunity in it. But the thing about it is that you still don't see to this day a lot of that happen, I would say, in the financial sector. And so, you know, if you look at it not as investment advice, but just saying, you know, but there's a lot of new podcasts now and bloggers out there.
Yes.
And especially you see it so much now with UWI students, and that's huge. So the game has changed, and it is changing through the internet now and technology and social media, you know. But if you think about like call it a COVID portfolio, I mean, it's very evident. The brokerages don't speak about it a lot, but it's very evident what's doing well. You know, we're still waiting on mail pack results, but let's assume they could do well. Food is king right now, so separate results huge. Lasco distributors, Lasco manufacturing results came out very well. Pharmaceuticals, so Indus Pharma. So if you said, you know, these 5 or 7 stocks, and that's a portfolio, depending on what price you look at, those have all done well.
Yes.
Now the other 70, 80, 90 listed companies have all kind of had sideways or marginally down results. Some of them have been really hit, and then you have the tourism companies.
Yes.
And then we're waiting to see, you know, Lasco Financial was down substantially. You know, maybe 1 or 2 banks might surprise us, but some of them should be hit with credit losses. So if you think about what's doing well is the pharmaceutical companies, and but let's be clear, Indus Pharma, MDS was down. Food is king, but not the ones in tourism, right? So the local food.
The local food
Meaning
industry.
the Derrimons, the you know, the Lascos, these ones. Even Grace just came out, big, not a surprise, but very good results. And then also maybe logistics, like a mail pack.
Yes.
So you almost have a little bit of a portfolio there that should continue to do well over the next, if you're that type of investor, over the next, you know, 6 to 9 months. But the key question will be is, which we don't do a lot in Jamaica yet, like earnings estimates and stuff, is for the June quarter, which the results are due August 14th, right after the holiday, is how bad will those look?
Wow.
Because the thing is that those results won't look good, and will that impact the market or not? Interest rates are still low. Some people might say they're not going to impact the market, but we do know when the good results come out. JMB just had fantastic results tomorrow, and the price never moved. So when the good results are coming out, maybe just with the way that person's psychology is right now with COVID, people are behind on their bills, they're behind on payments, they're focused more on their family and food. So people are not rushing to buy stocks right now. It's a reality.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have to be honest, you know, speak the truth more in Jamaica. And the reality is that the market will have a tough time right now. Yeah.
But we do appreciate, you know, those suggestions that you gave. I mean, I'm sure our viewers will certainly be grateful. Okay, Mark, I know we're winding down, but I was actually listening. I was listening to the audiobook for The Richest Man in Babylon, right?
Yes.
And we're at a time where, as you mentioned, people's interest in finances and money is at all-time high.
Yes.
So people want to know, like, how can they become wealthy? So for example, like me, a country girl, come Kingston doing her thing, and I see Mark, and Mark is super rich, and I want to be as super rich as Mark one day. What are some of the steps that you would advise me or other persons out there who are watching? What are some of the key steps they need to take?
What part of the country you're from? Because whenever somebody says country in Jamaica, it always means like Westmoreland or somewhere. Or
no,
where?
I was born in Manchester, but I'm actually from Trelawney.
Okay.
Yeah, right. So it's real country, cockpit country.
But remember what I said, and it's funny you mentioned that book, because I am now, and I think this is what I tell everybody, I am now just focusing on this book.
The Richest Man in Babylon?
And it might sound funny, because I think the first thing you have to do is become more selfish. Because if you're working, for example, whether it's a family business or another business, sometimes you're just working, and you're not putting yourself first. So remember what I said to you? I was a minority shareholder, and I was just thinking about business, and you're just trying to grow your equity. And then wham, you have your moment, and then maybe you weren't thinking about yourself. So you take a step back, and now you really say to yourself, you form Croskery Capital, you're now going to think about yourself, pay yourself first. So I think the most important thing is, whether you're from country, whether you're from Kingston, wherever you're from, social media has changed Jamaica.
Yes.
Everybody can see now everyone's kind of wealth or the lifestyle they want to live, where they would like to position themselves. There's perception, there's reality.
That's the other thing, because a lot of people maybe flaunt on social media, but are not necessarily living that kind of life.
But I think the most important thing is that everybody tells you this general rule: pay yourself 10% of your salary or save money. But it's not practical, because everybody can't necessarily take down 10% of your salary. But I think the key thing is you have to be selfish. I've seen persons who are younger than me who actually understand that book from they're 25, then they're 30, because they get it from young that they got to put something away early. You could be working your whole life and you are so unselfish and you're just helping everybody. But you got to realize that you have your children, you have your own individual family to look out for, you have your personal goals. So I think it's such a testament that that's important. You can't buy your own stocks unless you have your own money.
True.
You can't buy your own bonds unless you have your own money.
True.
And you can't buy your own real estate. You can't buy your own business. One of my mentors used to always say to me, this table, or let's just use your chair, it can't stand up unless it has 4 legs.
Yes.
So you need money for your stock portfolio, your bond portfolio, your real estate to give you rental income, and to buy businesses to give you dividends. And what that's really saying is that when COVID hits now, tomorrow, one of those is going to go sour. So you need the other 3 to hold up that chair.
Yes.
And if 2 of them go sour in COVID, the chair is going to drop. And if 3 go sour, the chair definitely going to drop. But at least you'd have the 4th one.
Yes.
Because if the stock market collapses, you have your bond income. But at least you have 4 things. But the first key in your 20s or your 30s is you need to be. Persons don't like to use the word selfish, but I have learned the hard way that you must be, to a degree, selfish. Build yourself and invest in yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know you use the term selfish, which for some people it may kind of rub them the wrong way. But actually, it really, when you based on how you describe it, it really is actually a life lesson, because as you rightly mentioned, you cannot, there's this saying that to pour into others, you have to be filled, or when you're on the airplane and they say that you have to put on your own mask first before you can help the person.
Yes.
If in case of an emergency. So you're actually right, because in order to fund all of those interests or those investments, you need the money.
So in a way, what it's saying is, like that book, you need to get your own. You need to get your own in life. And so as you set your goals of what you want, or say your vision board, think about what's the best way to get it. If your starting salary is 1.2 million Jamaican, let's say it's 100,000 Jamaican a month, how do you move from there? Are you just going to give up sweat equity and work for free? to grow a business, or you need to still be very clear with your terms. You know, I need a salary increase, or I need to go from 100,000 to 200,000 Jamaican, but I also need 10% of this business.
Okay.
Then by year 2, I need to get to 20% of this business. You see, if you go and work 5-10 years, which is what my point is, which a lot of us as Jamaicans do, and then you don't kind of incrementally improve all the time, then you could end up in a bad situation.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, and I think that's what that book really kind of goes into a lot, is, you know, get that gold, you know, go after it. You have big vision, you know, big things, but make sure as you're doing it, just like with your TV show, you know, what are the goals and how do I monetize it and how do I go from there?
And I like that. I like the monetize. Mark is an investor coming soon. All right, so my last question for you, Mark. I mean, because as we mentioned, we've heard about your story as a trailblazer in the financial sector, and you've given us some life lessons as well and some tips for the stock market. Just for our viewers as we wrap up, you know, maybe about 3 tips that you want to share with them, you know, just to guide them in terms of not only financially, but just life, you know, to become a successful person. Because one of the things about Trailblazers, when we feature persons like yourself, is that we hear your story, but also our viewers are looking on because they want to be like you one day. So some tips that, you know, you can share with them.
I think really, you know, personally I would say you got to pay it back, right? So so while you think about yourself, you know, help everybody at the same time.
And how do you do that, by the way? I
think I mentor people. You know, I do. You know, you have to return calls if somebody, you know, randomly calls you. You might get a random email. You know, you might get a random DM that says, "Hey, they'd love some help." So I think you try and pay it back. You know, to the extent that, and I've had to learn this also, is to the extent that you can afford, to the extent that you can put yourself out there. So, you know, you want to go the extra mile, but so you know, pay it back as you can afford. You know, I think also, you know, learn to be able to say no. It sounds cheesy, but you do need to manage your life where you can also say no. You know, I think no matter how much you want to grow, there is a habit when you're younger, you say yes to everything, you want to grow very fast, but you have to understand when to say no at the same time, you know, in a respectful way.
And I mean, and I know you're answering and you give me a tip, but how do you really say no? Because, for example, somebody like me that's so sweet and nice, like, how do you actually know when an opportunity, or it may not even be an opportunity, maybe you're called upon to assist with someone you know in your heart you can't manage it, you know, so how do you know?
I think even in your position tomorrow, you have a fantastic personal brand, you have your show, so you have to really think about your brand is important to you. So sometimes by saying no, you're protecting your brand also. So it's also about, there's only so much you can do, you know, in a day. And so, you know, when you're trying to grow aggressively, being ambitious, you might be in a habit of saying yes, yes, yes. But the reality is that, you know, that person could use your brand in a negative way. You never know, whether it's personally, your company. And as you grow and you're doing well, you have to be very careful about managing, you know, your brand, your company brand. Reputation is everything. So I think, you know, knowing when to say no is important, you know, at that point in time. And it's quality over quantity. It's very much, you know, finding those winners. I mean, that's a big thing that, you know, we're looking for at Croskery Capital at the end of the day. And we love helping families, you know, going through my lows, you know, having my moment. I mean, I really actually, my takeaway is I love helping families now. There's so much families out there who have similar experiences, and you know, you help them find a great CFO, you help them with boards, you help them with you know, their vision, you help them with their business plans. And my story is not unique, you realize. You know, my story is transcending all over Jamaica in every parish, and there's so much business out there, and there's great financial companies that actually want to arrange and help, and they want connectors like Croskery Capital to make it happen.
Make it happen. I like that. That's one of my favorite saying. Continue to make it happen, Mark. Definitely a great interview. We appreciate the advice that you have shared, and continue to be a trailblazer. All the best with Croskery Capital Limited.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much, Mark.